Hi, it's Colli from Colli Talks Transformative Conversations. Well, it's been 2 weeks and it's time to do another podcast. I have a lot of guests that are coming on in the very near future, and you will be so thrilled, as I am, to interview them and to share them with you. But in the meantime, I thought I'd give it a little bit of a break and just come back to me for a moment here. Not that it's about me, but just what's going on. I recently changed one of my Facebook pages, the name actually, to transforming the limited version of yourself. Oh, have I had a lot of feedback on this one? This is great. I love it. Limitations actually become strengths, and strengths and sacrifices actually become opportunities. Have you ever thought about it that way? Well, limitations can impede growth, right? But it can also induce it. And environments with little water, for example, plants developed spines. Yeah, can you imagine? It's about survival. And people who lose one of their senses often find that some of their other senses are heightened. And the smaller the animal, the more fruitfully it multiplies. And the colder the climate, well, the beefier the inhabitants. So I live in Saskatchewan, and I can't say that necessarily is true because maybe we are having warmer winters. And so there's not as much need to, protect ourselves with regards to extra weight or extra survival. The interesting thing about weight is that it is a survival and it is a protection. And a lot of people don't get that. Whether it's they're armoring themselves to protect against the external environments, meaning people, places, and things, or whether they are protecting themselves from themselves. Something to think about, right? But that's not what well, it is kind of what this is about because we're talking about limitations. So the more you compress, for example, a spring, the more strength you build in it. And the brain was once squeezed into a small space, right? So too small to see, but the explosion it triggered is still taking place. It's interesting. The poet E. Cummings, while incarcerated in a French jail cell during World War II, wrote a book called The Enormous Room. And being as tomorrow, and by the time you actually probably listen to this, it'll be today, is Remembrance Day. It's very, very prolific in ways because if you think about it, what our veterans did, they left family, friends, and they went. Unbeknownst to them, where they were even going, they knew they were going to protect. What a gift they have given to us. And especially because I am involved in trauma, very much so. And on my way, actually, next year we'll be working towards my doctorate in trauma. I'm so blessed because, trauma heals. And trauma heals if you liken it to a tree, but I'm not just talking any tree here. I'm talking about a tree called the birch tree, where we have plenty of them here in Saskatchewan. They're beautiful. I love them. They're my favorite. They actually peel, but they heal. And that's like trauma. If we can get to the peeling of it, it can heal. But we have to get to the healing through the peeling, right? And a lot of people don't want to do the peeling. And that's okay. I get it. But it's so worth it because there's just a whole world opens up to you. And coming back to our veterans, a lot of them didn't get a chance when they came back because a lot of them didn't come back. And a lot of them that did come back were never the same. How could they be? Having faced what they faced, been through what they were through. So when they enter back into a scenario that they left, the scenario has changed for them because they could not possibly imagine receiving love, warmth, nurturing when they've left behind what they left behind. So there's a lot of hidden loyalties there, a lot of limitations. And then a lot of times now, generations since have carried on and carried these hidden loyalties, and they too feel they don't deserve or they can't go on in ways that they should, where they're prosperous, happy, joyous. So then the limitations are capped. And that's why I'm working through with people now about transforming the limited version of yourself. And as I was saying before, the brain is confined into, a nutshell, but look at its reach. The entire universe, we're told, right, was once squeezed into a too small space to see. But the explosion it triggered is still taking place. So it really may be that when we no longer know what to do, as the writer Wendell Berry once said, we really have come to our real work. And when we no longer know which way to go, we really have begun our real journey. The mind that is not baffled is not employed. The impeded stream is the one that sings. So it may be with the impediments to our own callings. Hunger speeds to the plow. And when you can't buy solutions, you invent them, right? Criticism can teach us and can teach you to rely on your own intuition. The job you hate can pay the bills while you go to night school. And childhood trauma, for example, can set you up to do your work in the world as it has with mine. Childhood trauma that I experienced, I would never even have begun to think it, that it was that until I did what I did, which was all that I've done through all the studying and all the amazing experiences that I've had through trauma exploration and the discovery into it. And so now, because I have done all this, I get to see the fact that, as I was saying before, that like a birch tree, it peels and it heals, and desire can come again. Yes, desire for a life, desire for your life, desire for my life to go out and be fulfilled, right? So personal tragedy, it can propel you to start up an organization, for example, to help others who have suffered the same fate. And sometimes, parents who were negative role models for you following your passions may actually motivate you to rebel against them. And I know a lot of clients that I have, this has happened. They totally have rebelled against their parents and, have done amazing things. So a competitor actually may end up being someone you can actually team up with. And two competing calls can over time come to benefit each other. I was thinking the other day about Ann Tyler. I don't know if you know of her, for example. An amazing writer. She once described that having children initially put a drag on her writing, but in time inspired it. She says, they slowed down my writing for a while. And in the beginning, I was drained. Too much care and feeling were being drawn out of me. But eventually, when I did write, I found I had grown richer and deeper because of them and had more of a self to write from. And it's so true. I see it in families. I see it even in my own self with regards to my daughter and now my grandchildren. There's this depth that comes, and you think it's never going to get accomplished. You're never going to get completed. You're never, whatever. But the richness that comes from that, of being with the children, the grandchildren, that richness gets written into the writings. So, we all have limitations, but what matters is how we convert them into our own creations. They're among the raw materials for composing a life. They're really the straw that can be woven into gold. So, for example, pianists wouldn't think to judge themselves because their hands only had 5 fingers each and not 6 or 8. You get what I'm saying, right? We shouldn't unduly begrudge our own limitations, but find actually the destination in destiny. I love that. If you think about it, finding the destination in destiny. Limitations are just about, well, all that the artists, for example, Joe Sam had when he started out in his life. His first art projects were paper mache sculptures made of old newspapers and spit, mobiles made with wire hangers and collages assembled using strips of lead, oh my goodness, based paint that peeled off the walls of his apartments where it rained and when it rained. And those were the only kind of art supplies that he could find in Harlem. And, the circumstances of Joe's early life were not designed to encourage artistic initiative, but he did have, and he once, mentioned as an unshakable indigenous spirit and a school teacher who took a personal interest in him. And it brings to mind, I too had an amazing teacher. She was amazing. In grade 5, her name is Mrs. Stapera. And she actually brought so much light into so much dark of my life. I was in grade 5, as I was mentioning, and I had just returned back from my place of care with my aunt and uncle and living with my biological mom and dad. And there was a lot of fear. I won't get into it now, but there was a lot of fear. Can you imagine? You go from living with who you think are your parents to living with who you think are your aunt and uncle. It was just very confusing and it was a lot of fear. And so, of course, the kidneys get affected very much so with fear. And so I had a very, very severe kidney infection and I was hospitalized. And she, Mrs. Stapera, my teacher, actually was one of very few people who came to visit me in the hospital. And it was she, Mrs. Stapera, who actually brought my classmates from my school in a school bus trip to see me. Now, did that make an impression? Did that make a lasting someone cares enough and values me enough? You bet. So, as with Joe's early life, a school teacher, right, who took personal interest in him as in me. And, today he's a successful collage artist living in San Francisco. And today I'm a very successful trauma expert with an MA master's and next year moving into my doctorate. So we never know, right? We just never know. And anyone can make headway in life with a heap of resources, whether it be money, time, all the right tools and all the right contacts, a stained, round of applause and intact self-esteem, right? But creativity, the creative artistry really demonstrates itself in the absence of these resources. So, I got to thinking about callings, right? My calling, unbeknownst to me, is what I do, what I love, my passion. And it is a limitation. And this explains why some people choose not to follow it because it's not easy. But, by following a call, we narrow our choices and we close doors we may never be able to reopen. And that's true of me because the more in depth I got into the trauma work, the more I could see of how patterns were repeating, hidden loyalties were being acted out over and over again. And so, you know, I became naturally afraid of losing that freedom of choice, but I did it. And this, may be especially so for those who were brought up with old callings as stations, religious especially, and in life that were preordained rather than chosen. So, that can sound an awful lot like a caste system meant to discourage independence and any move from one station to another, such as changing jobs, marriages, or hometowns, right? But going against one station was for generations considered an act of insubordination, and really exercising one's free will and self-determination was considered secondary to a god who appoints those stations. But there's a big thing there, right? There's that big but. So, if we don't ever choose, however, freedom is just an illusion, right? An idea in the mind. And so if you listening right now, if you are standing at crossroads with paths going off in all directions, that you have, in theory, great freedom. Because until you actually make a choice, freedom is only potential energy, energy in abeyance, in waiting. So as soon as you head off in any one direction, you've not only limited your freedom, but you've also given it a body in motion rather than in a static body. You've turned the potential energy into kinetic energy, energy in use, freedom that you're now exercising with every football kick, right? So any creative act is the ideal place in which to practice and witness the trade-off between choice and freedom. When you write, when you take photographs, when you do art, when you do anything at all, you define a theme, a setting, maybe even a set of characters, right? So, but by creating, you also destroy. You narrow your focus. You sacrifice the whole for the part. You perish the thought, at least for now, of other roads you might have taken, other stories you might have told. And when you're done, you've fashioned not only a life, but also chronicled a death, ghosts and all. And you know what else you've done? You've transformed the limited version of yourself that others have placed upon you. So for now, I want to say until next week, have an awesome week. And remember, you are loved. And I am sending you love and soul hugs. Bye for now.